Hey, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. Well, I'm a great believer in taking lessons from whatever happens in your daily life. Sometimes they're horrendous mistakes that I've made myself, which is not unusual. And then I watch public figures. Now, if you've ever gone onto one of those sites which talks about the life stories of some pretty famous, successful people who are successful now, and go and have a look at some of the challenges that they had to meet. Some of them, I remember a very abrasive lady called Joan Rivers, who used to go on, and boy, she did a number a little bit like the guy that's been going on doing the awards, the Academy Awards, and he's been going on there and roasting everybody. Well, Miss Rivers used to do the same, and she used to roast everybody, but it was very funny, and just the same as Ricky Gervais, and he's going on, and yes, he's rather brutal and funny at the same time, probably as long as you're not the one that he's roasting. Well, Joan Rivers got to the point, for some reason, where she was taken off, and she started to lose ground very, very fast, and nobody had a good word for her. She wrote in her story later that she went from having a show of her own with massive money. She went from that to, I think she lost her husband, which was a terrible blow, plus she couldn't get a gig, and in the end she was going out for $50 a night. Now, for someone who had their own television show, that's a pretty tough thing to be able to say that you're going to do. Even John Travolta went through a very, very slow period in his life when nothing was happening, but then he took on a very, very low fee for a movie that came out that, against all odds, was very, very successful. So there are many that are like this, and if you're having a tough time yourself, sometimes it helps to go and look at just how tough it was for some people who you've always looked at and thought it was so easy for them. Jim Carrey at the moment is actually going on now and saying that he wishes everybody could have a go at being rich and famous, because if they did, they would very quickly realize that it's not the answer. It doesn't automatically make you happy. Now, I always say that that's something that Filipinos have already got the answer to, and it's mostly ignored. Some time ago, Beth and I were going through an extremely difficult time, and I think that at one point we were being featured on as whipping boys to gain views for about 10 or more different sites who were there saying, making a lot of allegations which were not true and couldn't be proved because they were not true. And boy, we went through a situation where people were photoshopping bad stuff on our pictures, and it was really rough. It's difficult to come to terms with that if you know that all that you're actually doing is trying to help. Now, I've mentioned before that I met a man called Larry Malley. Larry Malley helped hundreds possibly thousands of children who had cleft palate, and he did that by creating Medical Mission Matters, and he gained the support of many skilled surgeons who could put that cleft palate right in small children if they managed to get the child before he or she got too old. And so they were doing miraculous stuff, and it was Larry Malley that put it all together. And we went to meet him, and he said, in conversation, he said to me, I was a really tough cop in New York, and he said, I did that for over 30 years. He said, what I found is it was easier to put a really bad man, criminal, behind bars than it is to help people. And that's what we found, that what we were trying to do was to help people. Well, we got in trouble because we didn't have paperwork done. Nobody looked at how many people we'd helped. They looked at the paperwork. And we had people who were making death threats, who were saying how they wanted to put a bomb, and all stuff like this. And even getting in touch and telling me that they could get me out of the country because, let's face it, Terence, you must realise you can't win. You're going to go to prison, and you're not going to be able to survive prison in the Philippines. And we had all of this, all terrible stuff that they were saying about me and about Beth and what we were doing and how we were cheating and stealing and scamming. Well, it was hard to take, but in watching social media, I became aware of how badly two men were being treated, two other men who were being treated, and they were having terrible things said about them, and being called pretty nasty, malicious lies and names. And I mentioned this to Beth, and I said, you know, we're not the only ones who are suffering in this particular way. Just look at what they're saying about these two men. And I read out what they were saying about these two guys. And she listened carefully to that. And I said, do you know who they are? Well, one was President Duterte. And the other one was President Trump. Well, because I speak the language, I started to watch President Trump. Now, irrespective of whether you vote for President Trump, or did vote, or whether you oppose him, if you look at him as a lesson to be learned, I watched a video about him last night, and this was a video, actually it was today, God, some of the days are so long, it was today I watched a video, and it was a compilation of little clips of all of the shows, celebrities, comedians, actors, politicians who laughed out loud about the idea that Trump, Mr. Trump, could become Mr. President. And they were so derisive. They said, just the idea, Donald, you're not going to be president. It will never happen. Listen, get real. And that was the kind of thing. And we all know what happened about that. But during all of that was a man, Mr. Trump, who held his head high and developed his strategy for how he was going to win. So, they all laughed, let them laugh. and he did what he had to do, and he got out there and he did his marketing, which Trump is brilliant at, and he won the presidency. So that's when the Democrats started to try to take him out, and if you've been around for the last 3 years, you've watched even that get even worse, and actors and actresses going on and saying, well, one actually said, I've been thinking seriously about about bombing Trump. Things which really they should be arrested for. I mean, in our case, people didn't come out. They did it all from I think of it as being behind the bushes, because they didn't use their real names. See, but I learned from Mr. Trump. He was my teacher, because no matter what, no matter how hard it begins to be, there are many stories which will help you through. Trump always focused on the positive. And when he was interviewed, if the interviewer said, loaded the question, well, it's common knowledge, Mr. Trump, that everybody has said that you are totally unpopular, and he would say, no, it's not true. No, everybody hasn't said that I am unpopular. In fact, I've been told, and people have been saying, so-and-so, so-and-so, everybody has been saying that I am very popular. And he used repetition. I am very popular. The one thing that I am is very popular. Okay? So it's not true what you're saying. I am popular. And he used the whole idea of repetition, which is the basis of learning for us mere mortals. You say something enough. You say it as many times as it needs. When people teach on talks, on seminars, they know that they have to repeat something about 8 times, I mean forcefully, in order for people to get it. And there are very, very simple rules for this. And when Trump was being harshly interviewed, he would use a technique which a man called the dog whisperer, Caesar, he used to use a thing called pattern interrupt. And when a person is talking, they are expressing, let's say that the concept that they're speaking is this long, and it's going forward like this. Now, if you do the obvious thing and wait until they finish, and then you've asked somebody to do something and you wait until totally they've finished, then chances are that they will now be focusing exactly on the request that you're about to make, which you don't want them to say no to. So what Trump does is he butts in the middle. No, you're not. No, it's not your. No, it's not your turn. And he uses pattern interrupt. Now, the most graphic example of how this is used is the dog whisperer. He would take a dog that was apparently incurably mad dog when it saw another dog as the dog was walking along beside their owner, and the dog would go crazy and attack the other dog. And what Caesar did is he would give it a little nudge, around, one of those back kicks, and he would just give a little kick in the rib cage, and the dog would have its pattern of focus would be taken, and then he would say heel, and it would come back to being an obedient dog. And he trained dogs for owners who were having terrific problems easily, quickly, because he knew exactly what to do. Me, I can't get a dog to stop peeing in the kitchen, but then I don't know much about dogs. So learning a lesson from someone who is going through similar things to you, even though obviously the magnitude of what Mr. Trump or President Trump is going through far outweighs even all of the trouble and strife that we've had. But I can still learn, and have learned a great deal. Other people mentioned other man, Colonel Saunders. He realised he wasn't going to be able to live on his social security check, and so he decided that the one thing that he had as a value was his secret recipe that was given by his parents, I guess, his family. And so he tried to market that without telling it. He said, I can increase your business. And he went round from restaurant to restaurant, and apparently it was some quite staggering number of refusals and losses that he took, denials, rejections. Some, apparently, I've read 8,000. He didn't give up, and he took every rejection as being one step nearer to success. Even Sylvester Stallone did the same thing. He was watching a real-life fight between a boxer who was better regarded than apparently a boxer that had been given no chance, was something of a loser, and was not the favourite. He was going to be beaten. It was clear, and yet something in that loser of a boxer made him fight hard, just like the Rocky movies. And that was what Stallone, who is sitting in the audience and watching that fight and to the end, and the favourite had a tough time beating that fighter. No doubt there's somebody out there that's going to tell me what that match was, and who those fighters were. It's not a secret story. Stallone said, this is a great story, and he went home, and in one way or another, somehow he wrote the screenplay for Rocky. And even then he took a great deal of rejection, because they wanted someone like Robert Redford to play the lead, someone who was assured of great success, and he wouldn't take that. He went from an advance payment of $300,000, which back then, we're talking over 20 years, aren't we now? Some 15, 20 years ago. And he refused $300,000. He was living hand to mouth. He had to sell his dog for a few $100s to live. And later went back and offered the man hundreds of dollars to buy it back. So he saw that as something that he could do, and he held out for his dream. And he said, I am Rocky. And eventually he settled for $30,000 is the story. See, so he learned from something in real life, just as in the same way that I'm saying we learned from President Trump and President Duterte, that they, even in their position in the world, in the case of Mr. Trump, the most powerful president in the world, and Duterte is the leader of a nation. And these men were being criticized and their names blackened, and they didn't give up. They were iconic figures. There's so many. Steve Jobs was another one who actually had to leave the company that he started, took terrific losses and went away and succeeded magnificently. So if you're out there and it's going tough, watch President Trump, and he'll teach you a few things. This is a foreigner in the Philippines. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.